Welcome everybody to a wonderful event once again this year, the 2021 Combat Art Symposium. And I've got a special guest here, and I'll just go right in and let him introduce himself to you.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Hey, everyone. My name is Col Craig Streeter, United States Marine Corps, recently retired as of the 1st of September, 2021. It's a pleasure being here.
All right, good deal. Well, we're here to talk about your combat art, your career, what you've been doing lately, but focusing on the work recently done for your Hartford Masters of Fine Arts program, which you are now an alumnus of Hartford, as some of us are. My first question to you would be, what was your first experience with Marine Corps combat art, or how did you first come in contact with the program?
So the first time I even knew there was a Marine Corps Combat Art program was I learned of it through a magazine article. I think it was in like Sea Power or one of those, those periodicals that come out. It was around the 2007 timeframe. I could be a little bit wrong on the date, but it was an article that featured Mike Fay was in it, and it talked about his experiences. I guess he had just gotten back from the war zone, and so Mike was chronicling his recent experiences in this article, Sea Power. It blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, there are Marines out on the battlefield still doing that kind of stuff. I grew up always with a pencil or something in my hand. I've always been drawing. So the thought that maybe, just maybe, I could be a part of something like that and do that as well and be a combat artist like Mike Fay. That's the first time I learned about the program, first time I truly got excited about it. My first experience was actually reaching out to Mike Fay via phone call or email, I can't remember. But that was, again, right around the 2007, 2008 timeframe. And Mike invited me to his studio down in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I was at the Pentagon at the time. Just a super treat for me. It all worked out. Got a chance to visit him, and just one of those great things. It just worked out.
That's interesting. We have a very similar beginning here because I too contacted Mike Fay. He was actually overseas at the time it was Iraq. Taking that contact brought about interviewing and coming into the program.
You mentioned coming into the program. I mean, I was thinking, here I was a major at the time in the Pentagon. I thought, how can I get into the program? I'm a Cobra pilot. That's how I was trained. I would think about how could I do it, but it just didn't seem like it would ever work out. Mike was very patient with me, very good. He brought me along, and you know what? He kept encouraging me, and that's what I need. I need just a little bit of encouragement just to keep that little goal in mind. If ever I could ever get a chance to do it, to get into the program, I would jump on it. And of course, that happened about 7 years later.
Well, I remember a Marine officer coming into the studio in the warehouse at 3034, and you, of course, are that man.
Yeah.
Share with us that a little bit.
Yeah, so that was 2013, late 2013, early 2014 timeframe. So fast forward, I had met Mike 2007, 2008, got this idea of combat art in my head. I never let it go. I went on to do other stuff, went over to Germany, and now I'm back. It's now 2013, 2014. My wife, Chris Ann, said, hey, what's going on with the combat art program? Because she knew how much I really enjoyed that. So I'm like, I'll go stop by the warehouse. I remembered where it was. Mike had shown me. Mm-hmm. And that's when I met you, my friend.
The great part is I remember this colonel. You were a colonel at the time, correct?
Brand new colonel. I just
So I see this very interested Marine colonel coming into the studio. And so I'm like, what? And I think a lot of this, of course, has to do with relationship and serendipity, providence, whatever you want to call it, vocation. I think a lot of it is. And so I was just very happy that this could have happened. It's rare to find somebody who is either uniformed or trained as a Marine and then trained in the arts or skilled in the arts. It's very hard to find those two.
I wasn't trained, but I had raw skill, right? I have a real desire to learn.
Well, we look for that. We actually look for that in the fleet. So it doesn't matter. It is the portfolio that always counts. Training and ability to go around in a place that's not the best atmosphere, perhaps, for doing academic art and going about and safely and well executing artwork. So
yeah, I think it's great that the program had the ability to crack the door open for folks like me, Marines like me, that just have a talent. It's raw, but they have a real drive. They want to be involved in this great program that the Marine Corps has. Fast forward, what happened? I was on a staff tour in Quantico. I had the desire to be a combat artist, to be part of that program, and you told me that when you were leaving, you were staff sergeant at the time, if I recall, and you said, hey, listen, I'm going to leave, and I'd asked you, who's going to replace you? I don't know if you remember that, but I said, who's replacing you as the combat artist? And you said that you didn't have anyone lined up, or there wasn't one lined up. At that point, I said, I think I'm going to try, and that's what I did. I started.
Yeah.
I asked a lot of general officers, here I am, like you said, a brand new colonel, and I was over the Futures Assessment Division, and I said, hey, look, I told my boss, a 1-star, General Calais, I said, boss, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I want to be a combat artist. But you know what? To his credit, he didn't say that's dumb or you're going to ruin your career or what are you thinking? He said, hey, listen, if you're that excited and passionate about it, and I showed him some of my artwork as I had, my limited portfolio. And he said, hey, but you're going to have to get the permission of the commanding general of CD&I at the time was General Gluck, who's a 3-star.
Sure.
And talk about Providence, General Gluck and I had worked together at AFRICOM. So I had worked for General Gluck. He knew who I was. And during that tour, I had done like a farewell gift that was using art. And so Gluck remembered me and he said, hey, I know Streeter. If General Calais says it's okay, I'm good with it because I know you can kind of draw, but you need to get the General of Education Command, General Widely, Command of Staff, you're going to have to get him to say yes.
Yeah, he was Marine Corps University at the time.
Marine Corps University, thank you. General Widely had to say yes because I would be reporting to him as a colonel. General Widely was a Cobra pilot like I was, and he actually trained me. So
well, there you go.
Right, and he said, so I had, my boss said yes, his boss said yes, General Widely said yes, but it came down to manpower. And of course, that is a 3-star level decision to have a Marine colonel do something like combat art. And it was General Milstead was MNRA at the time. So I had to get that 3-star, and that was a long shot, except for the fact that General Milstead used to be Colonel Milstead, my group skipper, fellow Cobra pilot, who I flew with many times. So General Milstead was the final go-ahead, and I got the orders to be a combat artist in 2014.
Good deal. Well, with that said, that's a good segue. We're going to look into your work here. And all right, so we're just going to go through these, and I'd just like to ask you, give us the details of what medium it is, what size it is, and of course, what the narrative is that's going on as that's depicted here.
I don't have the exact dimensions, Chris, so I apologize, but
that's fine.
Fairly large. I want to say it's like something like maybe 12 by 24 or something like that. So this is acrylics, Prismacolor pencils on watercolor paper. This is a scene that when I got sent over in 2014 to Afghanistan, I took a lot of pictures for photo reference. And this is Lance Corporal Grow, and we're in the Helmand province. And I snapped this photo when he was atop something called FP Wing. I think it's Fire Position Wing. And so we're somewhere deep in the Helmand province. Lance Corporal Grow is just sighting in his optics. I snapped a photo, and this particular painting was done out of my 12. I think I had to create for my thesis. This is like painting number 10. So I was starting to find my groove. And
all right.
So I like this one. I think it's, quite frankly, I think it's a pretty good painting. As far as an illustration goes, though, Chris, between you and me, the importance of narrative, it almost looks like he's shooting or he might be shooting. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
But he's just scanning the horizon looking for bad guys. And on this particular day, there's no bad guys. But yeah.
This sounds weird, but it just looked like Helmand Province to me. Having seen both the wonderful resort areas of Anbar Province and Helmand Province.
That's Afghanistan. That's September of 2014.
Right. Explain this wonderful little artwork here.
Yeah. So that is, I want to say it was earlier that same day. We had just gotten out of the MRAPs and we were on patrol. I think this is 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines. So,
Sir, Craig, could you please explain what an MRAP is? I know what it is, but could you explain it to the people who might not have ever been in one?
It's those big truck-looking, mine-resistant trucks in the background. So they'll take them in and out of the combat zone. So we just climbed out of that big truck-looking thing. Mine-resistant app.
Yeah, I can't remember what it means. Yeah.
Yeah, in any case, I should know.
But it's a very good thing to be.
Yeah, so we were on patrol. Again, based off of a number of photos. So this is one of those things where combat art is a great thing. You can take many different photographs and you can kind of combine the images into one. So this is kind of, this is a Marine with Elmer, the bomb sniffing dog. So Elmer was, everybody's best friend on patrol. While it's 110 degrees, the Marines are just, sweating. But this particular Marine paused for a moment. I snapped the photo and the ones that supported in the background, put them all together, and I liked the result as it came out. This is also acrylic on watercolor paper. with Prismacolor pencils.
And what was the title again?
This is Elmer and Marine.
All right, good deal. Good old Elmer. All right, very exciting piece.
This is the milk truck under the Saddam Canal Bridge. So, well, I'll explain. So before I was a combat artist, I was a Cobra pilot. In order to put this piece together, this captures an event that myself and my wingman, Brian Brueggemann, that occurred to us in mid-March or late March in 2003 in Nazare. And on this particular day, there was a mortar that had been lobbing, mortars onto the Marines' position, but they couldn't find it. And while we were flying around the battle space, we noticed a single white-looking, we called it a milk truck, that was parked underneath the Saddam Canal Bridge. And the Saddam Canal is basically north of the town of Nazare, where the battle was going. In this scene, it has me and Brueggemann finding the milk truck with the mortar in the back. So there's a mortar, and there's some Iraqis kind of beating feet getting out of there. But once we called that vehicle, we found out that, that was in fact the mortar. We got cleared hot to engage. And the follow-on engagement was Brian and myself lining up with 20 millimeter cannon, and we took out the milk truck, we took out the mortar, and that was that. But in this scene, I like it in the fact that it kind of shows the Cobra cockpit. That was my uniform, how it was put together at the time. That's based off of photographic stuff I had. How we put the rifle, for example, that's all factual. I used Google Earth to put that scene together.
Well, I find it fascinating. Now, you were able to destroy that enemy asset without harming the bridge, which was a very important objective for the Marines.
Oh yeah.
Wow, good deal.
20 millimeter cannon.
So we always talk about the difference between combat art and combat illustration. And this is one of those wonderful hybrids because it is telling about a famous scene or a battle, which was Nasiriyah, which is very important in the push to Baghdad, but it's also from your own personal experience. So this is the combat artist's own experience of a battle.
Yeah, I wanted to tell this story. I remembered the milk truck and always will. I just wanted to share my story, right, with someone else. If it's maybe 100 years from now, someone sees that, they'll know at least about one small engagement during the Battle of Nazare.
Well, and there were Marines that were depending upon you at the time. They'll remember that as well, and they'll like this image as well.
This is called Three Snakes Crossing the Rock. And this happened very early during again, it's another Iraq piece, 2003. A lot of photo reference of Cobra cockpit canopies. I had to pull out my old survival maps. I had to pull out my old knee board. You just pulled all these reference material together to create this piece. So Three Snakes Crossing the Rock. And what this is myself, my wingman, Brian Brueggemann, and then my other wingman of that day, Matt Schinberger. And they're crossing southern Iraq, east to west, flying into kind of a setting sun. And we were flying three abreast when we came across the army invading Iraq from the south, going south to north. This was the big run on Baghdad from the 3rd Infantry Division, and they're called the Rock of the Marne. Three Snakes Crossing the Rocks. What
I thought was funny was when I was looking at this piece and I knew that title, I thought, well, that's interesting because the Rock of the Marne, that's almost like a rock snake itself. So technically there's kind of like four snakes in this picture. Anyway, it's very interesting.
I like this piece, just the detail. I mean, I got right down into the gauges on this particular one. That's what it looks like in the Cobra cockpit when you're flying. Yeah. Those indications on the dials are correct. You can see the FLIR, the green image there, the thermal sight, and then also the pilot's reflection in the little mirror that they have in the front cockpit. That kind of made it more personal, I thought, than just pictures of equipment. All acrylic, and definitely a large piece of Blick watercolor paper, 140 pounds.
The one thing I also like to see in combat art is when the viewer is placed in the position of the Marines or the people that are there. I think it's a wonderful thing because they can much more easily just naturally see themselves in the scene. I think it's more exciting that way. And none of us I've never been in a Cobra, so that's kind of neat.
This is what it looks like, y'all. If anyone's ever been in a Cobra, this is kind of, I feel pretty good about that as far as, I think I got the canopy and I got the cockpit and the dials, even down to the pencil on the knee board. You stab your pencil into the knee board, that's kind of how it hangs. And oh, by the way, that stuff on the knee board, those papers that rip, that mimics the ones that I still had for reference. That's where the rip was. And
nice.
The other thing is factual.
Oh, good. Historically accurate as well. That's always good.
Yeah.
Well, that's another wonderful thing about combat art, the combat artist can verify from his own or her own personal experience, and also has some of the artifacts and reference materials in their possession, which can help with accuracy. And so it's a wonderful thing.
Especially I needed that for the 2003 pieces to put those events together that were so long, removed from my memory, just to make sure I got it right. It's this titled Come Left.
Come Left. Now, this is a very interesting story you shared with me, and very exciting, or not riveting in a sense. Could you share what happened that day?
Yeah, sure. So this is my helicopter. On this particular day, I had a mission along with my wingman, Brian Brueggemann, who's not in this picture, so he's outside the picture. But we were traveling from south to north along this highway, heading towards Baghdad. And we were flying at about 120 feet off the deck, off the ground. And it was no one shooting at us. It was a very quiet scene, and we were just cruising. And I was in the back seat. My co-pilot Steve Fair was in the front, taking it easy. And all you could hear was the bop 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 of the rotor. And suddenly I heard in my ear, "Come left," which is like pilot talk for turn left. Come left. I remember thinking, like, who was that? Was that for me? Who? And then it came on I heard it again, "Come left," this time very stern. And of course, rather than question who it was, I just came left and turned the helicopter, put it in a left-hand bank. And when I did so, something like flashed right down the side of the helicopter. I mean, under my rotor, it was, inches away from my main rotor and, my missile pods on the right side of the helicopter. So it nearly hit us. And anyway, it was just a flash. And I told Steve, my co-pilot in the front seat, I go, "Steve, what was that?" And he's like, "What was what?" I said, "Something went right down the side of the helicopter." And he goes, "Well, I didn't see it." And I turned the formation around to see what it was. And it was in this picture here. It was a radio tower or a cell phone tower. And it was the color of dirt, like the sand had stuck to it. So it was kind of earthy in color. And it was right next to the highway. It was 120 feet tall. It had the little guy wires holding it right next to the road. We missed it by a matter of inches. And so Steve, my co-pilot, I'm like, "Oh my God, we almost hit that thing." And Steve was like, "How did you see it?" And I told Steve, I didn't see it. I go, "Steve, did you tell me to come left?" And he's like, "No." I said, "Steve, did you hear someone tell us to come left?" He's like, "I didn't hear anything." So I got on the radio and I called my wingman, Brian Brueggemann, and I said, "Hey, Brian, did you tell us to come left?" And he said, "No." And there's no one else around. And you can look in this picture, there's no one. It's the middle of nowhere. I paused for a moment and I keep the radio and I talk to Steve and I go, "Steve, you're not going to believe this, but I turned because not once, but twice, someone told me to come left. If I hadn't have done that, we would have hit that tower and we would have been dead." To this day, I have only one explanation of who it could have been, like a guardian angel. Someone told me to come left, and if they hadn't, I would have hit that tower. I just, by the grace of God, I think it was my guardian angel. This is back to Afghanistan. So this is, again, 2014, September of 2014, also with 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, I think Bravo Company. And we're in an MRAP. And we had just patrolled a village, and I want to say it was called Ludan. And we had just spent time shaking hands with the elders and making friends. And they said there was no bad guys in the area. And it was, but, again, thank God it was no firefights or no one shooting at us. So I remember feeling pretty good about the engagement, the whole civic engagement with the elders in the town. And we got into our MRAPs and we were on our way. And as we were pulling out of the town, I looked out of the MRAP window, it's bulletproof glass. I looked out of the glass and there were this group of about 6, maybe 8 young Iraqi kids. Some were young, like I'm going to say like 4 or 5, and others were a little older, almost like teens or tweens. And they were chucking rocks at us. All of them were, they were picking up the rocks from the shadow of the building and tossing it at the MRAP and ricocheting off the sides or whatever. I looked, there was a sergeant that was sitting next to me and I said, "Hey man, check it out. They're throwing rocks at us." And he's like, "Man, they always do that." Like it's no big deal. Like they always chuck rocks at us when we leave. And I'm like,
"Of course."
What do you do about it? And he's like, "Nothing, man. They're just kids." Evidently, Marines have been hit on the face with a rock. And he goes, "It sucks, but what are you going to do? They're just kids." So it made a big impression on me. And is this how they really feel? And I suspect that is. It comes out maybe not through the elders and what they're telling you, but it comes out in action through their kids. That, maybe we're not as welcome as we think we are.
Or perhaps they just want to hit a big, cool object like that every time, and it's fun.
Yeah,
you
they're
know,
kids, right? It's-
and to snap at the heels of the big dog, so to speak. You know what I mean?
yeah, I guess so. They are
Or
kids, right? But
yeah, they're kids.
but you tell your story, but this is flipping it, right? It's through
Yeah.
the eyes of the kids. Anyway, I think it made it more interesting. So
Yeah, I do believe that's a good vantage point. Like we talked about earlier, sometimes you put them in the viewer in the cockpit, or you put them with the patrol. This is with the kids.
but again, also another acrylic and Prismacolor on watercolor paper. This is Surrender near the Ramallah oil field. I think this is near Basra. This is my very first combat flight, as a Cobra pilot. 2003 invasion of Iraq. Mission was armed reconnaissance. So Cobras, myself and Brian, were sent, into the fray to find the Iraqis and shoot them. On this particular day, you're nervous. I'd never been in combat before. I didn't know what to expect. I thought that for sure, if I was going to see a tank or something, I would be able to see it from far away. We were looking way out in the distance when suddenly I looked down, and 50 feet away from us was an Iraqi tank, with a 50 cal machine gun. 50 feet. I was flying right over the top of it. I never saw it. We broke hard and tried to get away from it. Turns out that the Iraqis were going to surrender. They had no desire to fight us. Thank God. I could have been shot down right then and there. But their tanks were dug in, and I tried to show that, they were kind of sunken in on these ditches. They were the perfect mimic color of the sand around them. So unless you were looking for them, you might, like I almost did, fly right over the top of them and never see them. Once we regrouped and zeroed in on the armor, it turns out it wasn't just one tank. It was a field of armor that was dug in. And the Iraqis started blowing up their vehicles. I think they were dropping grenades in their own vehicles to make sure the Marines wouldn't capture them. So that's why that one is burning in the background. Those Iraqis had sabotaged their own stuff. So one by one, they started to light off. As we pulled into a hover and got reoriented on the threat, again, no one has shot at us, but this particular tank here were 3 Iraqis that were standing on their vehicle, and they surrendered to us. So we pulled up alongside, and I gave hand motions to move to the north. The Marines were just north of this position, that they could surrender to the Marines. And of course, I got on the radio and told them that these Iraqis were coming, but they were surrendering, and they were so happy when they saw that we weren't going to shoot them, right? They thought we could have wasted them with a 20 millimeter gun, and we didn't. So they were really happy, and then they moved away. But if you look in the foreground, you see one Iraqi with a rifle. While I was focused on these 3 that were surrendering and was feeling pretty good about myself for having these folks surrender to me and get them off the battlefield, I turned my attention off the battlefield for a moment. And later on that afternoon, I didn't find out till much later, but I learned that someone was shooting at me with a rifle. So this kind of captures, even when you think you know what's going on, as crazy as the war is, you just can't let down your guard. On this day, I let down my guard and I got shot at by that guy, but fortunately, he didn't get us.
Combat art can also distill a series of events into one scene, or tell a multiple sort of scene and narrative into one picture. This compresses time a little bit, perhaps, or maybe he was actually literally waiting behind that one tank and shot at you.
He was waiting behind a tank, but
Yeah.
as you said, I put him in the scene here to get the same point across. You just never know. War sometimes is very unpredictable, but that's the scene in Ramallah. So this is, if you remember the mother of all sandstorms, if you go back in your history books during the initial push into Iraq, it's like the 26th or so of March. But on this particular morning, we drew the mission to go back towards Nazare and then keep moving north with a fight to support the Marines. This sandstorm was already happening, and this is early in the morning. I got up, I looked out the tent, and I thought to myself, there's no way in the world we're going to fly today because the weather's so bad. The sand is everywhere. That weird, eerie orange sandstorm. And my XO goes, when are you gonna hit starters? When are you gonna go? And this guy, is Lieutenant Colonel Hardison. I'm like, sir, have you looked outside? It's complete dog stuff. and he's like, dude, you got to go. The Marines are in trouble. They need close air support. You got to go. And I felt ashamed of myself. I felt like maybe I wasn't being brave enough by going into the sandstorm. I felt a little bit ashamed, a little bit embarrassed. But I remember almost being resentful, like thinking, all right, I'm going to fly and I'm going to crash just to prove you wrong. So we did. We took off in the sandstorm, and you couldn't see 30 feet in front of you. And so we flew right at ground level, and we just kind of slowly moved up out of away from the airfield and towards the fight. And at one point we came across these power lines. Now we knew they were there because we'd done a good map study, but this shows a moment where obviously the power lines out of the Sandstorm, and you pause and you go over them. You don't go under the wires, but we went over the little power line structure there, and then you just get right back down on the ground and keep going. So this kind of depicts a moment in time where we come across one of those power lines, and by the grace of God, that Sandstorm actually cleared up about 8 or 10 miles further to the north, and it got better and better. And by the time we got to Nazare, the weather was much better, and we were able to do our mission.
This is a powerful image from what we've talked about.
So you talk about the importance of narrative. We were in Nazare. This is another Nazare. I want to say this is like the 23rd or 24th of March. We
2003.
2003. We got there, and right away the forward air controller, the guy controlling us on the ground with a radio, he told us he wanted us to start shooting taxi cabs. He said that they've been using the taxi cabs to reinforce the bad guys' position all night. They've moved equipment, they've moved machine guns, they've been harassing us using these cabs, so start taking them out. Well, what they didn't know is there were cabs all over the city. The people of Nazare were just going about their business. So I understood the order and why it was given, but it didn't sit well with me. I questioned it. And Brian Brueggemann and I actually got in an argument on the radio about whether we should be engaging these taxi cabs. And we were like, I don't think we should. And he's like, we're given the order. They know what's going on. We don't. So finally, being senior to Brian, I got on the radio and I said, listen, who's the one giving me this order before I execute it? And then we got word that it was actually at the lieutenant colonel level. The commander of the forces on the ground was giving the personal order for us to engage. And so we did so, but we didn't do it. We did it reluctantly. So our first engagement, we took out the taxi cab and a woman was in the cab, right? So I overflew the cab, and you can 50 feet away, you can't mistake it. It was a woman. Now she could have been a terrorist, but you don't know, right? And I struggled forever because I wanted to tell that story, but I didn't want to do it in a way that made the Marines look like they were killers, like going after civilians. I originally had wanted to do the cab after the impact of the missile, but with a woman in the scene that way, it just never read well. The narrative was always wrong. But I figured if I did it this way, where clearly the Cobras are bearing down on the cab, and maybe just by the shadiness of their hull and butt, the driver looks a little shady, there's smoke going on in the background. Did the cab have something to do with the battle? It puts a little question mark of whether or not that cab is truly innocent, if you will, before it was engaged. And to this day, I really don't know if that person that was engaged was friendly or enemy, but kind of the horrors of war. Yeah, the whole shooting of taxi cabs was not a cool thing. So General Milstead is the guy who gave me the green light when he was a 3-star general much later to join the combat art program. So I did this portrait to say thank you, sir. I'm going to do a portrait of people that were important to me and the combat art program. And I could have never been a combat artist if it weren't for the green light from General Milstead. So I did this picture of him when he was a little younger, his full desert get up when he was a 1-star. But again, this is just my way of saying thank you and to pay my respects. This is all acrylic.
It's all acrylic, and it's on an illustration board, I remember, or?
This is also done on
watercolor
paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I was kind of digging the whole watercolor thing. It started working
Yeah.
for me.
Well, I like how this has aspects of watery mixing and also impasto texture.
Yeah, I was by this point, I was playing around with very opaque. I was doing gel medium in the acrylic. I was also just doing the kind of transparent washes to get the effect that I was trying to achieve with the acrylics. Always the Prismacolor pencil to clean it up at the end. So this is General Yu. Again, this is another portrait of people. I just wanted to say thank you. When I got to Afghanistan in 2014, when I talked my way into country, I didn't know if the Marines are going to say, here's this colonel. He says he's a combat artist. We don't want him getting hurt. Let's keep him inside the wire, right? But General Yu, he asked to meet with me. So I went and saw him the day after I arrived in country. I explained to him what my mission was, go to war, do art. And he was fascinated by it. And he said, whatever I needed, tell me, and I could do it. And so because of General Yu, I was able to patrol with the grunts. I was able to fly. I went in the back of CH-53s to pick out special operations forces out of the field. I was flying in command and control aircraft. I was with the engineers. I did everything I wanted to do during the time that I was in Afghanistan, all because of General Yu. He gave me the green light, so I just wanted to say thank you to him. This is going back to my days in Iraq. Huey Hewlett, he was the commanding officer of HMLA 269, which was the Cobra Huey squadron that I was attached to when we went in 2003, the first days of Iraq. He was our commanding officer, and I wanted to show what a warrior this guy was. Huey was the best Cobra pilot I've ever flew with. He saved my life, and I mean that quite literally, as he saved my life many times. He trained me. This was a labor of love for me. I just wanted to create a piece to say thank you. And so I know a lot of the pieces went into the museum, or at least I offered them to the museum. This is the one I saved, and I gave it to him personally. It meant a lot to him, and it means a lot to me.
That's the collection you just recently submitted, as a matter of fact, correct?
Yeah, that's the completion of my mission. So again, going back in 2014, I was given the mission to go to Afghanistan, do combat art, and I wasn't able to serve as long as I'd wanted to. But through the MFA program that I started in 2017, and I finished it in the summer of 2021, finally, 7 years after the fact, right? I was told in 2014, go to war, do art. In 2021, I was able to say mission complete, and that's the artwork that I created.
Yeah, and I think it's a testimony. You mentioned General Yu and General Milstead. It's a very powerful thing, not only serendipity and relationship, but when people you can inspire who are at a leadership level. It's a fundamental positive necessity, I suppose. And it's great when that comes together. And if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have these works here. And so it is a great thing that we were able to, and you were able to promote the program, show what we do, and then get in country and then get the stuff to work with. And that we're beneficiaries of that.
Well, absolutely. I think we've got to secure today, tomorrow, moving forward. We always need to have those general officers in our corners, backing us up, supporting us. I hope I played a little, small part in doing that. I think we need to be very mindful going forward. We've got to have those general officers in our corner supporting the program.
Well, sir, I'd like to just thank you for showing up, coming and sharing your work with us. It's been great. We're very happy to have this work in the collection and to hear your story. So is there anything, one more thing you'd like to share and before we sign off?
I just want to say thanks, Chris, for giving me the opportunity to tell my story and share my artwork. It's a labor of love. I really believe in the Marine Corps Combat Art Program, and I'm still here. If you ever need me, Chris, just give me a call. I'd be happy to throw the flak on and go out and do it again. And hopefully there's a Marine somewhere that might see this artwork and say, you know what, if an old broken down colonel can do that, maybe I can do it too. And maybe somehow I could, in a small way, inspire the next generation of combat artists to get out there and do that kind of stuff.
Certainly. Well, thanks, Craig Streeter. And we're going to do a little Q&A session here, and then we'll get those questions to the websites online, and you can maybe go in and answer some questions if they have. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Awesome.
God bless you, everybody. Semper Fi.